Hey, this is Peter. Today I'm in Edinburgh, Scotland, and what we're talking about today is minimalist storyboards. So to go on from my Budapest video, talking about only what you need, it's important to get shots in your film which are packed with colours, sound, score, sprinkled with dialogue sometimes. And they are coming from moments, they're coming from either things which have happened in your life, stories which are secondhand, dreams, memories, anything. Sometimes even just, if at your weakest it's the character journey, what they would do next. And that's not the worst thing in the world when it works, the cinematic language is strong enough that it kind of gives it a reason to be in the film, that it makes it original, I think, anyway. Metaphors, we got no place for that really, because they're just kind of saying something. I mean, I watched Tenet the other day, and it was just packed with these metaphors. As much as I loved it, that is packed with metaphors, as in, reverse. It's like, well done, you like reversing things. I don't want to say that's all the film's about. Anyway, so great film though. What I'm saying is that if you go from one shot to the other, that in itself is going to be able to be looked at in retrospect and say that's what these scenes are about together. They're going to do that on their own, so the audience is already 10 steps ahead of you, and you better believe that they're really kind of shit hot on what they're going to see on screen. So whatever it is that you are in your head trying to show them, they're already onto it. They already know what kind of person you are after about 5 shots. They know the truth so quickly, just as in this video, you can see the truth quicker than I'm able to fake the bullshit. So it's important to kind of be free and be open and be honest, and as much as you possibly can at that point in your life. So to be kind of conscious and present and just absolutely as truthful and authentic as you can possibly be. And that's what you should get in one shot. Now, what about the second shot? That's the first shot. What about the second one? The second one should maybe be in a different location, because you got that in the first one. So what's the second one now? Have you moved on? What's the atmosphere in the next shot? Should that be a completely different year, a completely different time? Should it be in the same location and maybe you've got 10 shots in one location? I don't recommend it, but sometimes the chaos is too much that you can't limit it to one shot. It has to be 10 shots. It has to summarize something through these 10 shots. Then it becomes about dilution. Are you diluting the atmosphere and the character throughout those shots so that they're all very kind of weak but they all equal one kind of whole? Well, then you've got no cinematic language. Your character's spread out too thin, and the atmosphere also is kind of, it's there, but it's not as effective as it would be in one shot. It's, there is a kind of purism to this which says you can tell so much in 1 minute in one shot than you can in 1 minute made up of, or even 2 minutes made up of 8 shots perhaps. One is so effective and the other is kind of diluted, non-cinematic language. None of those are memorable. Whereas the one will probably stand out as, do you remember that one shot though? And it's not all about remembering shots, but if it sticks in your audience's head, it's interesting, it's not boring, and that's the point. If you have the castle in the background, you've already got the castle in the background, you've said that, you've given the audience that information, and the atmosphere here is very green, it's a kind of overcast day, it's still kind of like midday, so you got that idea. You've gotten a feel now for Edinburgh, Scotland. You know what it's like in my world that I've chosen to show you. So if I had a character in here, the character would have to be doing something that isn't kind of, it's atmospheric, it's adding to the atmosphere, but how is it adding? Is it adding expository dialogue? Well, no, we don't want that. What do we want him to do? We want him to, and this is the difficulty, this is like, now you have to fill it in. It's like, why do you have to fill it in? Why can't you just have 2 guys just hanging out talking? I mean, that's what they do in Trainspotting, for Christ's sake. They've got like the scene at the park, they've just got 2 guys talking about James Bond, and it's like, that's memorable. a lot of the expository dialogue isn't memorable, and you got to think about that. Why do they need a lot of that expository dialogue? Now, the obvious answer is to tell the story. No, you don't necessarily need that to tell the story, because the story's not as important. Basically, the idea there is that whatever the plot device is, so in Tenet it would be, spoilers for Tenet, it would be that kind of nuclear thing, whatever that is. It doesn't even matter what it is. The point is that it's important. They want it. And in the genre films, there usually is that really obvious MacGuffin. MacGuffin in Before Sunrise is the fact that he's got to get back before the train. So maybe the train home is the MacGuffin. Vienna is the MacGuffin. Love is the MacGuffin. I don't know. The relationship is the MacGuffin. It's so difficult when you get to that level, but there is always technically one, and it's like, are you going to figure that out beforehand, or are you going to figure that out in retrospect? And I know the answer I would do. I'd figure it out in retrospect, and let everyone else worry about expository dialogue, free act structure, whatever. I'm going to worry about the characters going through a life and showing the transformation. Not that has to start and stop where it starts and stop either. So the idea here being that the action of the shot is conditional to the shot itself. So, anything that goes on in a shot should just be like found footage. It shouldn't be obvious that the actors are doing a scene. It should be obvious that, this was staged for your enjoyment. It should be more like a documentary a lot of the time. Not that it has to be stylized like that, because there is a certain style when you think of a documentary, as there are millions of different ways of making a documentary. But I think you'll know when something feels staged, feels acted, and when something feels real. I mean, I know in Before Sunrise they feel like it's, every time they thought it was kind of like acting, they would be like, you're acting. Whereas having the shots where it feels like we're just following these two people, that's great. Orson Welles famously said that the enemy of art is the absence of limitation, and what that means is that instead of having such an open kind of sandbox where you can do whatever the hell you like, the world is your oyster to just pick from wherever you want, a camera to be, whatever kind of character you want, you've got to kind of hone it down, that boundary box of create a frame, and what's in the frame and what's out of it, in the words of Scorsese. The point of it is that this is precious, and this is like a painting in an art gallery, and every frame matters. So in the edit you only pick what you need. When it comes to what you include in the frame, maybe you should only have that one box to choose from. The Lighthouse comes to mind. I know that's a very kind of artistic example. Some might call it a pretentious film. I think it's fantastic, because at its core it does that Kubrick-like thing of only having just a one perfect shot where you can just do whatever you like inside that shot, and it feels more important because you're only seeing that. That's very precious. That's like a prose. That's like a line of a poem, whereby you only get those kind of 4 or 5 words, and then you're left to think about that, because there's nothing to kind of get lost in. There's no chaos. It's all ordered. But the chaos is maybe what happens within that shot. So, I can do whatever the hell I like, and then it's all randomized, and it feels random because I can't really control how this looks. A cinematographer can't really control how an actor is going to fly through the frame, or ultimately what happens in that frame. But what you can control is the frame itself. To a degree, if you're moving, then you've got even less of control, haven't you? So it's like, where does order meet chaos in your films, and where do you kind of overlap sometimes? Usually with me, I find the easiest ways from experience is you let the actors do whatever they like. You should kind of be more on the improvised side with the actors because of how human beings work. With the camera, you keep it pretty fucking static, especially in this digital age where you move a camera this small and it shakes to fuck. You got pay for these amazing kind of like stabilizers just to get anywhere near decent. Don't try and fake it. Don't try and go around thinking you can do it like the professionals, thinking you're going to be the steadiest person. It ain't going to work. You're going to lose more footage than you'll get. It's best to just kind of create that boundary box and say, this is the age we live in. It ain't like Paths of Glory. It ain't like The Shining. It ain't like those days where you can just, or Goodfellas, Copacabana, where you can just go around and do whatever the hell you like. I did that. Didn't really work. So cautionary tale with digital cameras, even the heavy ones like a Red or something, tried that, didn't really work. Also the bitrate kind of messes up as well. Just a technical side. I know the technical people are going to go nuts at me for that, correcting me, but in my experience the easiest thing to do is to get static shots. Then it can be a bit dry, so sometimes maybe you want to give it that shot and get the 5 seconds of walking. I know that I have as well, or maybe a shot from a car window or something, at least something that has some motion, because it is a bit dry if it's all static, admittedly, but it allows for that focus on frame. This is why I shoot at night, because I have a lot more control, and the more control you have, the more order you can bring to the chaos, the more appreciated it's going to be, the more kind of your world is going to show up. Whereas if you do something where the chaos of it gets out of hand, the less it's going to feel like your world. The sun's just come out and it probably doesn't feel the way I wanted this video to feel anymore, so it's kind of like going off in its own direction. And the fact that it's static really helps, because I know that at least the frame works. What we're always looking for when it comes to writing scripts and doing the storyboards for like a visual script is what I call these eureka moments, and they're never really to do with character, although sometimes they are. What I mean by that is that the best eureka moments are the ones which feel so random and chaotic, but yet they've come from my mind, so they must be part of the world, and they just feel right, is the point at which my unconscious, I think at least, my unconscious mind has generated these ideas up. And when it's all from the conscious, it doesn't really work. It becomes very fake and becomes very kind of structured and boring, because I believe if a human being can think of it, it's probably pretty crap, unless you're Edgar Allan Poe or Bob Dylan or Werner Herzog. The fact is, or David Bowie, the fact is that having this idea just formulate seemingly from nowhere, from the depths of some bog from your mind, really helps you have a kind of freedom from that outcome of, you don't care what shot comes after that. And so then you're able to completely come up with a new shot, no ties to any other thoughts that you may have had in that scene. It's just one shot. There it is on the storyboard. What about the next one? David Lynch talks about this, how 70 ideas, one after the other, and then you've got a film. He's like, where do you get those ideas from? He hooks them from meditation a lot of the time. So I don't believe you always have to come up with it from a meditative process. It does help. So what do you fall back on? You fall back on character a lot of the time, because character is one of the most important things you can have in a film. What would you do? You would try and alter that shot so that it's a little bit different from any other shot that you've seen, because if you're coming at it from character, chances are you haven't thought about cinematic language. So the cinematic language will then, you will try and make it work, and in trying to make it work, you're failing to a degree, because even though cinematic language is important, you have to alter it slightly so that it's not like anything you've ever seen before. And there's a level of forcing and pushing which goes there, which it's not going to be good unless it works in a natural way. All of this is kind of helped by the location that you choose, and of course that location is subject to change through construction, scaffolding, whatever. So you really need to go to these places multiple times, see how much they work in terms of your world, whether they're truly important or just kind of, it falls apart very easily. How stable is that location in terms of, even if a bus was parked in the way, you could still do something there. Even if, the whole kind of the weather changed completely, you could still do something there. You're doing a forest in summer, it's obviously going to look different from how it is in winter. Sometimes if you're doing, say, the River Thames or something, the tide will change. So you've got to think about these things. Sometimes the crowds will change, sometimes Christmas lights will come in, or a Christmas market will come in, for example, or different, it's clear how easily continuity can just rip you apart. Just continuity error, shooting it the normal way, which again is another reason why you should do shooting only what you need, because it saves all that continuity errors from ever happening. So there, fixed your problem straight away. Now you're allowed to be more artistic. You're welcome. So the colours that you decide on are then subject to maybe change, and if they're pretty much solid, that they're always like that year round, and that you feel like every time you go there it's going to be perfect, still watch out for it, because those are usually the ones that get you. I find the ones which you feel are perfect and can never have faults in them, you probably haven't thought about them long enough. It doesn't mean you should just throw something away just because you've only got a 50% chance of getting it, you feel. Just go for it anyway if it's important. And then, is it then vital to the story? If it's vital to the story, if you can't walk away from it, then you shouldn't really be in the film, because chances are you're not going to get it, and you're definitely not going to get it perfect the way that you had in your head. So everything should be subject to change in time, which means the whole script should be subject to change, which means actors can be, what if your main character, which the whole film is about, what if you just don't even do a film about them anymore? You do a whole new type of film. Maybe you've done a whole film where you've done shots like this, and there's a guy in front of the frame, and then for like 70 shots, boring film, I know, but about as boring as these videos, and you would just kind of take that guy out and not need them and just have the location in the background. That's a very radical idea to do. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you're not able to do that, something's probably wrong, because it's gonna happen anyway. What if the actor dies? You're gonna come up with some kind of a backup. Anything can happen, any kind of chaos. It doesn't mean you should have backups and backups for everything, that you just go and shoot the backups. It means that you've got to be ready to shoot it from a different angle, shoot the, was the area important? What was important about it? Was the cinematic language the important part? So theoretically you can shoot it anywhere, which means the atmosphere is now up for grabs. You can shoot it up there with a different atmosphere. Was it only that you needed a tree? Was that all it was? So you could just shoot any tree. You could just shoot any gate. Even though Kubrick would have looked at 80 different gates from up and down the UK and then decided on one which he felt was the most appropriate, you got to aim for what you want and then be prepared to adapt all the time. So there's usually 1 or 2 shots, maybe 5 shots that you've had in mind from the very beginning that really is so vital to get in your film. And what I would say about that is, have you seen them in any other film in the exact same way? Have they come from somewhere? Not that you can't just do a kind of close-up, or, and close-ups on wider are different from close-ups scaled like that, so maybe with a 4:3 aspect ratio perhaps, so think about that. Usually the 4:3 is better for close-ups compared to a wide shot, because, take a look at the two, you'll see. But there are different aspect ratios which work better with different shots. Of course there are, just like paintings work that way with aspect ratios, Go to a gallery, look at some paintings, see what works and what doesn't, in terms of the shot. And see just how there is no story going on in those paintings. They're just paintings. But they're also not, are they? So let's talk a few things that you don't have to have. Transitions, don't really need them. Establishing shots, you don't really need them. Dialogue scenes, you don't really need them. I know I'm going to get a lot of comments about that. you don't need shot reverse shots at all. You don't need long shots, really. I'm just coming up with them now. Yeah, I mean, just as obvious as you don't need over the shoulder shots, you don't need, these standard shots in place. You can do whatever the hell you like, really. It doesn't mean you should just do loads of Dutch angles and just hope for the best, or, it doesn't mean you should come up with the craziest shots that you can think of and hope for the best. But what it does mean is that you should be thinking about your shots in terms of, these are paintings, these are, whatever I'm showing because of these maybe 5 or 10 reasons that I've not necessarily even figured out atmosphere-wise, but, they're there like that. And if you've been thinking of them since the very beginning, the 5 or 10 shots that you just think are so vital to get this film made, and they're like, a famous film that you've seen before, maybe change them a little bit just so that they're a little bit kind of still saying the same kind of thing, but they're in a completely different, altered atmosphere, because you're probably going to have to alter them anyway. So it's best to get something that's just a little bit odd, it's a little bit weird, not for odd's sake. I always say this because you're going to get people just putting it off to the side just because, or you're going to get some weird things that you've never seen before just because. You're going to do them upside down. Why? Just because. So for shooting gear, and with these videos I usually pick the most obvious shot, although I do try and make it a little bit creative when I can, but you have this limitation of you always need the guy to be in the middle. Usually I could do a video where I'm just kind of like stood like that, but why do that, right? The fact is that if I was shooting here, I'd want the castle, because I personally would like that kind of interesting thing that you're never really going to see anywhere else. And that is a little bit of a trap there, because it's like, do you need that just because it's here? No, of course not. It's a postcard shot. But is the fact that the castle's in there part of the atmosphere? Maybe. Maybe the just the kind of the hill, the cliff is the atmosphere that you need, not actually the castle itself. Maybe the colours are the important part of it. Maybe if I was getting a shot of this, I'd do maybe a tight shot of the hills up there. Maybe, the instinct is to go through trees and see how that looks. You might even try like a ground level shot. I just go for these, I have these shots which are just template ones, which I always think of. That's dangerous because now you're referencing yourself a lot of the time. It becomes too they'd say about Wes Anderson's later films, it's like he just does the same thing again and again. It's like sometimes Wes Anderson will do the same thing as he's done before. You fall back on what you know. When you always fall back on what you know, it becomes a problem. In terms of your career, it's not like a style. It's not like only you can do that. Quentin Tarantino can't always do the exact same thing. You gotta start doing things differently. You gotta not fall back and just kind of play about and even subvert your own style and kind of do shots which start off the way that you always do and then mess about with them, because you've only got a few chances to experiment with this genre. And because you can do whatever you like, you wouldn't get 10 paintings of the Mona Lisa and have them all exactly the same, just with a different woman in the front of frame. You would want different types of paintings. You would want, it doesn't matter if you always do portraits or if, let's say you always do impressionistic paintings. They don't always have to be of like a city at night, like Paris at night in the rain. You don't always have to do that. But you can play about with the style that you've naturally kind of fall back on. If you always fall back on that style, that's what you're going to be doing a lot of the time. But if you can think of a way that it's different, that falls in line with atmosphere, and then says something about a moment from your past, you're onto a winner there. And you will know when it feels right, I think. If you've listened to these videos and you think for yourself and you've opened the gates to do whatever you want in life, to shoot whatever you feel like is important to you and free of all outcome, like you're just coming up with it almost randomly, it feels, I think you're onto a winner in terms of shots. Remember that you can do whatever you like. You're always experimenting. If you want to do a POV where it's like behind the hand of the gun, yeah, it's been done a few times now. When they first did it, it was original, and now it's, you know, I mean, a POV isn't exactly original now. We still do it because it says something about character. It's part of the language now. But it's always more interesting to find a new word to say. Now, if you want to see a lot more of these videos, if you want to see my topics ranging from character to cinematic language to atmosphere to sound to score composition to anything from the philosophy of filmmaking, from just films that you maybe should be watching, I go through all these topics like really in depth quite a lot of the time, and you know, what I'm trying to do is build this kind of like full curriculum of different topics which can be really explored and really kind of, as time goes on, just kind of, you know, mastered and dissecting each film one by one, including my own work, including the stuff that's going forward in my own journey. So, you know, if you guys are going on a similar kind of journey and you need someone to follow and to kind of work along with and to kind of be a kind of mentor figure for that, then I realise I'm just inviting myself to be your mentor. But, you know, this is what I'm planning to do. For that, I'm going to need some money. I'm going to need to be able to fund going out to places like this. I'm going to need to be able to fund making my films, and this is what I want to do for a full-time job. This is, honestly, I love doing this. So, you know, if you want to give some money and actually get access to these videos, I went to Boston, I went to New York, I went to Philadelphia, I've been to Vienna, I've been to Prague, I went to all these fancy places. But the reason why I went to these fancy places is because for a start, I wanted to go on holiday, but I also had to teach there. I had to show you guys absolutely that I am dead serious about this, not just as like a, you know, oh, this is how you set up a camera, this is how you want to be, you know, using the triangle of exposure and all this, and whilst all of these technical things are important, and almost, you know, cinematic language to like a mid shot, medium shot, long shot is important, 3-act structure is important, right? But the fact is that, you know, a film can be open-ended, so what the fuck is a 3-act structure? The fact is you can do whatever the fuck you like, really. It's just how it's judged in retrospect. Was it good in retrospect? So, is it an artistic piece? And if you guys agree, why don't you join up? Why don't you actually, you know, go down, press the link, and, you know, find these videos, pay for them, and get access to them. And I'll really appreciate that, and I'll be able to make more of them, and I'll be able to, you know, fund doing them maybe at a higher production value. Maybe I'll get like, you know, some kind of shots of films going on in the corner at the time as well, and that'd be really cool to be able to dissect films as I'm talking about them, maybe. And we shall see where we end up. But the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if I get a little bit of support, and you guys are going to get some great content because of it, because I will just not stop talking about film, and the stuff I have to talk about, the philosophy, the depth that I want to go to in this is like, you know, this is like I'm going into my own psychology, let alone you know, a filmmaker's kind of how far you can go with cinematic language and the philosophy of how you make a film. It's like, is there just one way to make a film, or is there multiple ways, and or is that whole there's multiple ways thing a big lie? So click the link, get those bloody classes going, and you start now. We'll both build up our knowledge together. I encourage fucking comments which are gonna talk about this, which are gonna talk about, you know, how we can go bit further with some of these ideas. I'm working it out the same way you are. I'm learning just as you are, just as Martin Scorsese is still learning now. I want him to be on this channel talking to him about, what the fuck is film doing now? Where do we go from here now that the greats have come and gone, and now the new greats are here, and now we've got digital and it's all a bit different, but it's still going to the roots of cinematic language and philosophy. It's like, what can we do with this? Where can we go?